The morning sun barely peeked through the curtains as 65-year-old Michael groaned, rolling onto his side. His joints ached like they were filled with gravel, but that wasn't the worst of it. Lately, even the simplest moments with his wife, Linda, felt strained. Not emotionally, but physically. His body just wouldn't cooperate anymore. Doctors had shrugged. "It's just age," they said. But Michael refused to accept that. Then one Tuesday, his old army buddy, Carl, dropped a bombshell over coffee. "You ever think your issues ain't just down there but up here?" He tapped his temple. "Back in Nam, I saw guys heal bullet wounds with their damn minds. Sounds crazy, right? But what if I told you there's a breakfast that kickstarts blood flow and rewires your brain?" Michael scoffed. But when Carl slid a faded notebook across the table, filled with scribbled recipes and strange symbols, his curiosity won. The first page read, "Eggs aren't just food. They're a signal to your body. Wake up." Michael stared at the notebook, his fingers tracing the strange symbols next to the recipe. A mix of eggs, turmeric, and something called ashwagandha. Carl leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "This ain't just about food, Mike. It's about listening to your body. Back in the war, we didn't have fancy meds. We had to talk to our pain, figure out what it wanted." Michael rolled his eyes but kept reading. The instructions were bizarre. "Cook slowly. As the eggs simmer, imagine heat melting the blockages in your veins. Taste isn't the goal, awareness is." Later that night, alone in his kitchen, he gave it a shot. He cracked the eggs, sprinkled the golden turmeric, and, feeling ridiculous, muttered under his breath, "Okay, body, what's the deal?" Silence. Then, as the scent of spices filled the air, a memory flashed. His father years ago, hunched over the same stove after work, rubbing his lower back in silence. The man never complained, but his eyes held exhaustion. Michael's chest tightened. Was this the blockage? Unspoken stress passed down like some messed up inheritance? The eggs sizzled. He flipped them, half expecting nothing until the first bite. No lightning strike, no miracle. But for the first time in months, he noticed the warmth spreading through his stomach. Not just food digesting, but something deeper, like his body was finally being heard. The next morning, he woke up without the usual stiffness. Coincidence? Maybe. But when Linda reached for his hand at breakfast and he didn't pull away, she blinked. "You're warmer," she said. Michael didn't reply. He just stared at his plate, wondering if Carl's crazy notebook was onto something. For 3 days, Michael followed the notebook's instructions exactly. Not just cooking the strange breakfast, but doing the weird body dialogue exercises Carl had scribbled in the margins. He felt silly whispering to his own knees and elbows, but something kept him going. Maybe it was the way Linda had smiled when he hugged her that morning. A real hug, not the stiff half-embrace they'd settled into over the years. Or maybe it was the bizarre dream he'd had last night. His father standing in their old garage, handing him a rusted wrench and saying, "You don't fix what's not broken, you fix what's not heard." When he woke up, his back pain had dulled to a faint throb. That afternoon, he dug out an old photo album, dust clinging to the pages as he flipped to a picture of his dad at 40. The same age Michael was when his own health started slipping. The man's shoulders were tense even in the happy birthday snapshot, jaw clenched like he was biting back words. Michael's fingers trembled as he touched the photo. Was this the real blockage? Not just his body failing, but decades of swallowed stress finally screaming for attention? That evening, he tried something new. Instead of just eating the mind-body breakfast, he sat at the table and wrote down every ache, every twinge. Then next to each one, a memory that surfaced. His knee pain the day he got laid off and pretended it didn't matter. The stiffness in his hands, holding back tears at his father's funeral. The words poured out like a dam had cracked, and when he looked up, 2 hours had passed. Linda stood in the doorway, eyes wide. "You haven't sat still that long since." She trailed off, but he knew. Since before the pain took over. That night, for the first time in years, they fell asleep facing each other. Michael's palm resting lightly over her heartbeat, his own body quiet for once, listening. The changes came slowly but undeniably, like watching ice melt in spring. Mornings that used to begin with groans and stiff limbs now started with Michael actually stretching before his feet hit the floor. The sharp pains in his knees now just a distant memory. He'd begun adding new ingredients to the breakfast ritual. Cinnamon for circulation, walnuts for brain health, But the real shift happened when he started combining the meal with movement. Standing barefoot in the backyard at sunrise, chewing each bite deliberately while rotating his ankles and wrists in slow circles, he imagined years of calcified stress cracking loose with every motion. One humid Tuesday, as he stood swaying like this, a forgotten sensation rushed back, the playful energy of his 10-year-old self, back when his body was a thing of joy rather than betrayal. That afternoon he did something absurd. He kicked off his shoes during his lunch break and walked through the office parking lot barefoot, feeling every pebble and crack in the pavement. His assistant gaped as he returned grinning, but Michael just shrugged. The manual says ground connection helps electron transfer or something. That night, Linda gasped when he lifted their grandniece effortlessly, his arms remembering strength they hadn't known in a decade. The real test came Saturday morning when their old friends visited, the same couple they'd nearly stopped seeing because Michael couldn't sit through dinner without pain. As conversation flowed and wine was poured, Linda kept glancing at him nervously, waiting for the usual excuses to retreat to bed. But midnight found Michael still at the table, laughing freely, his hand resting comfortably on his wife's shoulder. Later, as they got ready for bed, Linda turned with tears in her eyes. "I'd forgotten what your laugh sounded like when it wasn't forced." Michael pulled her close, realizing with a start that the constant background noise of aches had gone silent, replaced by something he hadn't felt in years. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of possibility. Michael's transformation began rippling outward in ways he never expected. At his monthly checkup, Dr. Chen's eyebrows nearly disappeared into his hairline when the blood pressure reading came back normal for the first time in 8 years. "Whatever you're doing," the doctor said, tapping the chart skeptically, "keep doing it." But the real surprise came at the hardware store that weekend. As Michael reached effortlessly for a box of nails on the top shelf, he suddenly recognized the young clerk staring at him. It was Jason, the kid from down the street who'd asked him to join their community baseball game last summer back when Michael had scoffed that his old bones couldn't handle it. Now, watching Jason's eyes widen at his easy movement, Michael heard himself say, "Still need players for that team?" The words hung between them, tasting strange and sweet on his tongue like the first bite of a forgotten fruit. That evening, standing in the outfield with men half his age, the crack of the bat sent a jolt through him, not of pain, but of pure adrenaline as his legs remembered how to run. He missed the catch spectacularly, tumbling into the grass with a breathless laugh that turned heads. Later, as twilight painted the field gold, one of the younger players sat beside him. "My dad's got arthritis real bad," he said quietly, watching Michael flex his once stiff fingers. "Keep saying it's just part of getting old." Michael studied his own hands, the same hands that had struggled to open jars 6 weeks ago, now effortlessly peeling an orange. He shared the notebook's basics, watching the young man's face shift from skepticism to hesitant hope. That night, lying awake beside Linda, Michael realized the notebook wasn't just healing his body. It was healing the story he told himself about what aging had to mean. The stiffness, the resignation, the slow retreat from life, none of it had been inevitable, just unaddressed. As sleep finally pulled him under, he dreamed of his father again, this time standing straight-backed and smiling, holding out not a wrench but a baseball glove. The notebook's pages grew more weathered as Michael's experiments deepened, each crease holding a new discovery. When heavy rains canceled baseball practice, he found himself in the garage sorting old tools, the same ones his father had gripped with quiet frustration as his own body failed. But this time Michael noticed something different. A shoebox shoved behind paint cans, its contents spilling out. Dozens of unopened letters from his army days addressed to his father. Hands trembling, he peeled one open, the paper crackling like dry bones. The words blurred as he read his younger self's desperate attempts to sound brave overseas while secretly terrified. All those emotions he'd locked away because men don't complain. The next morning's mind-body breakfast tasted like ashes, but he forced it down, this time whispering to the parts of himself he'd abandoned. The scared soldier, the stoic son, the man who thought strength meant silence. That afternoon he did something unthinkable. He showed Linda the letters. Her tears fell on his shaking hands as decades of unspoken wounds finally breathed air. Later, standing under the shower's hot spray, Michael sobbed for the first time since childhood. Great heaving gasps that left him wrung out but lighter, as if his ribs had expanded. The following week brought an unexpected development. His hair, previously thinning, showed new dark strands at the temples. Even more surprising, when Jason's father came to him desperate for arthritis relief, Michael didn't just share the notebook. He found himself guiding the man through the exercises with a patience he didn't know he possessed. As they sat on his porch practicing the breathing techniques, Michael realized with a start that he was recreating the conversations he'd always wished his father had with him. That night, he dreamt not of his dad, but of his younger self, the version who still believed healing was possible, who simply nodded at him and said, "Took you long enough." The changes in Michael's life soon became impossible to ignore. His morning ritual, once just a desperate attempt to ease physical pain, had blossomed into something deeper. The neighborhood baseball games turned into weekly gatherings, with not just Jason's father but others from the community joining in, asking about the magic breakfast and the strange but effective exercises. Michael found himself leading small sessions in his backyard, showing people how to listen to their bodies, how to untangle years of ignored stress. Linda watched with quiet pride as her husband, who once struggled to get out of a chair, now demonstrated stretches with the ease of a man 20 years younger. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, she squeezed his hand and said, "You're not just healing yourself, you know. You're healing everyone around you." Michael let the words sink in, realizing she was right. The stiffness in his joints, the emotional walls he'd built, even the distance in his marriage, none of it had been inevitable, just unaddressed. The real turning point came when his granddaughter, visiting for the summer, asked why he always wrote in his notebook after breakfast. Instead of brushing her off, Michael sat her down and explained, in simple terms, how our bodies remember what our minds try to forget. How pain isn't always a sign of damage, but sometimes a cry for attention. She listened with wide eyes, then surprised him by asking, "Can we do the exercises together?" And just like that, the cycle of silence was broken. Months later, at a family barbecue, someone snapped a photo of Michael mid-laugh, lifting his granddaughter onto his shoulders without a second thought. When he saw the picture, he barely recognized himself, not because of how he looked but because of how he felt. Alive, present, free. Moral lesson: the body keeps score. Every ignored emotion, every buried stress, every unspoken regret, it all lingers waiting to be heard. True healing begins not with medicine alone, but with the courage to listen. When we stop treating our pain as an enemy and start treating it as a messenger, we don't just recover, we transform. Aging isn't the slow decline we fear, but a series of choices. Choose to move, choose to feel, choose to heal. Now come to the recipe: how to make 2 organic eggs, rich in choline for brain-body connection, half a teaspoon turmeric, anti-inflammatory plus golden energy symbolism, a 1/4 teaspoon ashwagandha powder, adaptogen for stress resilience, 1 teaspoon cinnamon, circulation booster, 2 tablespoons crushed walnuts, omega-3s for neural repair, 1 tablespoon ghee or olive oil, healthy fats for joint lubrication, pinch of black pepper, enhances turmeric absorption. Cooking method: mind-body ritual. Set intentions: 2 minutes before touching ingredients, stand barefoot on the ground. Breathe deeply for 7-8 rhythm, and whisper, "I nourish what needs healing." Slow cooking 5 minutes. Melt ghee on low heat. Imagine it dissolving emotional blockages. Whisk eggs while visualizing yourselves renewing. Add spices clockwise, each representing an element: turmeric earth, cinnamon fire, ashwagandha water, pepper air. Mindful eating 3 minutes. Chew each bite 20 times, noting, does my jaw hold tension? Does my gut respond? Pause midway to place hands over your heart and abdomen.